Since the realignment of the divisions in the NFL back in 2002, this right here has to be the biggest news offseason year for the NFC South, where every team made newsworthy discussions. You've never heard about the NFC South being talked about in the magnitude that it has been discussed as a division as a whole, like ever, in the 18 years of the existence of the division. You got the Saints, they made a signing. They signed someone who's going to help them out tremendously. You have Atlanta. They signed someone who has the potential to help them out tremendously if he can stay healthy. You have Tampa Bay. They pretty much just turned themselves into contenders, Super Bowl contenders. And you have the Panthers, my team. They made some releases. They made a firing earlier or during the season, and then they added some players, and then they had what I thought was an incredible draft. So let's talk about it. When talking about the changes the four teams in the NFC South made, or the additions, everything that they've done, it was the Bucs and the Panthers who, I guess, made a complete makeover with their teams. They Panthers got rid of a coach, but this was during the season. They let go of their quarterback for 9 years, added another quarterback, hired a new coach, with the draft and everything. And Tampa Bay, we all know what happened there. We're going to get into that as well. They got a new quarterback after getting rid of the quarterback they had for 5 years. Complete makeover there, with additions and everything. But the Saints and the Falcons, those teams, they didn't have complete makeovers. What they did was add key pieces to their teams. Key pieces that, like I said, could help them out a lot. Of course, health is always a factor with any team and with every player. The Saints' 2019 season ended in similar fashion. We all know the story. This is the third year in a row. This is the third year in a row in which they've lost a game on the final drive of the game. 2 years ago, we remember the Minnesota Miracle where they lost to the Vikings. Stephon Diggs caught the 60-some yarder from Case Keenum to advance to the NFC Championship. The following year, it was more the refs who pretty much cost the Saints that game, and with the non-call pass interference call that would have most likely put the Saints in the Super Bowl. And then last year, this past, a few months ago actually, you had the Viking situation. So 3 years in a row, and the season ended the same way. And now they're left scratching their head thinking about what could have been in those 3 seasons. So they go out and they, in my view, hear me out on this. In my view, they went out and got Michael Thomas some help. Michael Thomas, a big time receiver. Dude constantly catching over 100 passes for well over 1,000 yards. Like, it's not even close. He actually had about 1,700 yards this past season, and that was like 1,000 yards more than the next guy up on the team. And I believe that was the tight end, if I'm not mistaken. That's good and all. It's good for his individual stats, but at the same time, it doesn't benefit him. It doesn't benefit the team because you're getting these individual stats, but you still need help at the receiver position. And that's what the Saints went out and did for him. Team went out, signed Emmanuel Sanders back on April 6th to a 2-year deal that is reportedly worth $16 million. Emmanuel Sanders spent 4 years with the Steelers, 5 years with the Broncos, and he made his season debut with the 49ers this past October versus the Carolina Panthers. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler and made all those Pro Bowls with the Broncos. Actually, he was on that 2015 Super Bowl team that beat Carolina back in Super Bowl 50. And now he's been paired with Michael Thomas, and I think this is really good for Michael Thomas because his numbers are going to go down. Nobody's denying that. His numbers will go down, but he has a great number 2 receiver that he's going to be paired with, and I think they will complement each other very well, and I think Thomas will really enjoy having Sanders with him, especially come playoff time, come crunch time, and just overall because, like I said, Michael Thomas get the big numbers, but that's not always a good thing. It's good for individual stuff such as like contracts, of course, endorsement deals, and those incentives that people expect in order to give you more money in your contracts and everything. So that's good, but if you're looking for team success, Sanders is a great number 2 for Michael Thomas, and I know Drew Brees is happy about that for at least the next 2 years, however much longer he's going to play. So This is going to be really good for New Orleans. And this will also be good for Alvin Kamara, because Kamara did not have a great 2019 campaign. He was way off from the 2 prior years. He could win Comeback Player of the Year based off this alone, because he had a terrible, terrible season in terms of expectations and fantasy football owners. Kamara disappointed, and this could lead to him winning Comeback Player of the Year, because it'll take some focus off of him. Defenses will still know he's there, but they can spread the field even more now that Sanders is there. So this is a good pickup for the Saints. They're going to be a threat in the NFC South. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think there's going to be a lot of teams. Well, I'll say this: they're going to be in contention for the playoffs. There are going to be a lot of teams in the NFC South in contention to make the playoffs, and the Saints will be right there, assuming Drew Brees is still the Drew Brees, because when players drop off, you just don't, like Peyton Manning in 2015, when he dropped off, it just happened out of nowhere. He won the MVP in 2013. He had a really good 2014, and then out of nowhere in 2015, he just, like, the Peyton Manning we knew just disappeared. So it all depends on Drew Brees. It all depends on health. This is a very good team. They still have a really great defense, really good coaching. The Saints will be in contention, and they made a big pickup by signing Emmanuel Sanders. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play this year in 2020. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. This is a team that was in the Super Bowl 4 years ago. We all remember that story, up 28-3, ended up losing in overtime, the first ever overtime in a Super Bowl, 34-28. This team, they made the playoffs the following year after that, but they really haven't been the same since that season. Really high-powered offense. Matt Ryan won the MVP that season in 2016. They were a really good team. Sort of came out of nowhere. A lot of people, like the Panthers the year before, didn't really have too many expectations for the Falcons. For at least, as my memory served me, I don't remember a lot of people picking the Falcons to make it to the Super Bowl. A lot of people had the Panthers going back, and boy, did they disappoint everyone, because we remember how that 2016 season went. Horrible memories for me. But yeah, this is a team, the Falcons, who have always had the talent. They've always been a high-powered offense, and their main kryptonite has always been their defense. The Falcons' defense have always held them back. They've never really, I don't remember the last great defensive Atlanta Falcons team, to be honest. They had a rough start in 2019. They didn't make the playoffs. They started the season 1-7, and I'm looking at this, wondering how the coach is not being questioned, why no one is questioning Dan Quinn's job, really. This is a guy who has escaped judgment on what happened in that Super Bowl 4 years ago when the team blew that big lead. For some reason, the offensive coordinator, who can easily be overruled by the head coach, the offensive coordinator at the time, Kyle Shanahan, he gets all the blame for what happened in that Super Bowl, when all Dan Quinn could have done was overruled every call Shanahan made. And here we are again, in 2018, they disappointed by going 7-9. And then this year, they get off to a 1-7 start. Could have easily been an 0-8 start. They ended up beating the Eagles in a close game, but they were 1-7, still a really terrible start for a team so talented like the Falcons. Like I said, never really a great defense. We all know that if the Falcons aren't successful, it's mainly the defense that's going to hold them back. And that's another problem with Dan Quinn. His signature is defense. He come from the Pete Carroll coaching tree, and Pete Carroll's a defensive guy. So how is it that this guy come in, he gets to escape what happens. No one criticizes him for what happened in the Super Bowl against New England. He's supposed to be this defensive guru, but yet the Falcons' defense have never really been top-notch. They've never really had this defense that you just look at like, man, this is going to be a tough task. They've always had a pedestrian-type defense. So they start 1-7, and then in the last 8 games, they finish 6-2. They pick it up and show what they could have been in the beginning of the season. As a Panther fan, as much as I don't like the Falcons, I can't question the fact that this team should have multiple championships. How this team has never won a championship during the Matt Ryan era is just, I don't know. But they finished 6-2, and overall they go 7-9. Team decided to make some changes not much, but haven't really heard anything about their defense. But they made some changes in the offseason. Their biggest pickup was Todd Gurley. They signed Todd Gurley. He was released March 19 and was signed by the Falcons the very next day. Well, no, not the very next day. They signed him. Well, he officially signed April 6th. But the Falcons did pick him up the very next day, but he just couldn't sign yet. And the deal is reportedly worth 1 year. The deal is a 1-year deal that's worth $5.5 million, $2 million signing bonus. And if he reaches, it said if he reaches 13 touchdowns and 1,000 yards or more, he get an extra bonus of $500,000. So Gurley just needs to stay healthy. If Gurley stays healthy and the Falcons offensive line can protect, he's easily going to get that because Gurley is still a talented running back. So yeah, the team signed him. He spent 5 years with the Rams. He actually made his NFL debut in the final year that the team was in St. Louis. Drafted by then head coach Jeff Fisher. He was drafted in the first round, the 10th overall pick. In his time with the Rams, he made 3 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pro. He was the Offensive Player of the Year in 2017, 2-time rushing leader in 2017 and 2018, and he was the Rookie of the Year in 2015. He had a career rushing yards of 5,404 with the Rams with 58 touchdowns. 2015, he rushed for just over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. And in 2016, when the team moved to LA, Gurley was, in my opinion, I wouldn't say exposed. He wasn't exposed because it wasn't like he was a bad running back and he just caught everyone. It wasn't like, he was just this running back that caught everyone off guard. What happened was everyone knew that this team couldn't pass. Everyone knew what the Rams were lacking. So he didn't get exposed because he wasn't good. He just got exposed because the team wasn't good. In that season, 2016, the Rams we're talking about got off to a 3-1 start, but it wasn't a 3-1 record that we were taking serious because they played some really bad teams and they probably caught some really good breaks in those games. So they weren't impressive 3 wins. And everyone knew that they were going to drop off, and they did drop off, and I believe they won 1 game after that to finish 4-12. The team did draft Jared Goff that year, but Goff didn't start right away. He spent some time being injured, Gurley did. He did miss some games due to injuries. In his rookie year, he played in 13 games, started in 12, played in 13. He played all 16 games in 2016. In 2016, he rushed for 885 yards, but that's just because all teams had to do was stack the box against him. That's all they had to do was stack the box because the Rams couldn't do anything else. We know that they couldn't pass the ball. We know that they didn't have a quarterback that was ready at the moment. So teams just knew what was coming, and therefore he regressed. He didn't regress because he wasn't talented the following year after his, performance his rookie year. He just regressed because his team wasn't good, and that's not on Gurley. Gurley did his job. He still rushed for 885 yards on a team that was one-dimensional in all 16 games. 2017, he had a bounce back year, played in 15 games, rushed for 1,300 yards with 13 touchdowns. He was really good, really good. He also had 788 receiving yards to go along with 6 touchdowns. Todd Gurley, he was a big part of the Rams making the Super Bowl the following year, rushing for just over 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns. That was his career high that season. Last year, Gurley also played in 15 games, rushed for 857 yards. He haven't missed a bunch of games because of injury. Gurley haven't missed a bunch of games because of injury. I think the problem is he's been taken out of games because of injuries. And I think the Rams just figured that the position is expendable. You can easily find another one. And for what they were paying him, they just, thought, not worth it anymore. We'll find another running back. They count their losses. They let him go. The Falcons sign him. And this is going to be big for the Falcons, assuming Gurley can stay healthy. Because like I said, Gurley have not missed games. He's just been injured in the games that he played, and he's just been taken out for the rest of the game. Like I said, in 2015, he played in 13 games, and that's the least amount of games he played in his career. The years after that, he's either played in 16, 15, or 14. So he's playing in games. He's just getting hurt a lot, and I think the Rams just figured this is more trouble than it's worth. Let's just release him, and they released him. The Falcons got him. Now the Falcons have another weapon on offense with Matt Ryan, but for me, it's the Falcons. Not that they're a horrible franchise where they are devoid of winning. We know that they can win. We know what the potential is, but I just personally believe in curses on franchises. Like, I just believe that it's just something about certain franchises where they are just cursed from winning. Like, I honestly just don't think the Falcons are going to be, as big of a threat, because no one talks about the Falcons defense ever. You've never heard people say, oh, the Falcons defense this, the Falcons defense that. The Falcons has never had a great defense, and that's what their head coach's signature is supposed to be. So for the Falcons, I honestly just see an 8-8 season. It's like you have this window of opportunity, and when you let it slip, it closes, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's how I see it. It wouldn't completely surprise me if the Falcons were to be a playoff team, because we know what the potential is there. I just don't see them doing it because that's just what they do. They fall low of expectations. That's the Falcons' way. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a franchise that most of you haven't heard from, cared about, talked about since 2002. Because in 2002, they won the Super Bowl, defeated the Oakland Raiders 48-21, won the franchise's first championship. Since then, they made the playoffs again in 2005, where they lost in the wild card round to the Washington Redskins. And then the last time they made the playoffs was 2007, where they lost to the New York Giants in the wild card round. So, team haven't been to the playoffs since 2007, haven't won a championship, haven't won a playoff game since 2002, which was the championship season. This is a franchise that no one has talked about, no one has cared about for quite some time. The most attraction before what we're about to get into, the most attraction around them has probably been since Jameis Winston was drafted in 2015. But here we are talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I always look at it this way when it comes to a franchise as dysfunctional as the Bucs organization, because when you lose for so long, this is on ownership and management. People like to talk about the coaching and the players, but ownership and management have to take responsibility for this as well. And I mean, when you look at the Knicks, who are we talking about when we talk about the Knicks? We talk about the management, we talk about ownership, we talk about James Dolan, because that's where it starts. And it's always funny to me because I always look at the Knicks as an historically overrated franchise. The only reason we talk about the Knicks is because of where they play. They play in New York, media capital. In the past, they were a really good team, but that was way, way, way in the past. We're talking the 70s where they won back-to-back championships. They've been to a couple finals since then, but they haven't really been relevant. This is a team that has won probably about 9 playoff games since the year 2000, since that last NBA Finals run when they lost to the Spurs in the lockout season. But we talk about the Knicks constantly because they play in New York. And look at the Bucs. They're just as dysfunctional, but we don't talk about them because they play in Tampa Bay. That's just a little side vent I had to get out. It's just always funny to me how people talk about the Knicks and how they're this and they're that, but you only talk about them because they play in New York. But back to the Bucs anyway. So Tampa Bay in 2014, they had the worst record in NFL. They finished 2-14, and that prompted them to draft Jameis Winston out of Florida State. Winston led the Seminoles to a championship in 2015. Well, I'm sorry, in 2013. 2015 he was drafted. What am I saying? In 2013, they beat Auburn in the BCS championship, and that was the last year of the BCS format before they went to the playoff system the following year. And Winston actually took Florida State to the playoffs in 2014, where they were just beaten by Oregon. Oregon beat them down, and Oregon went on to lose to Ohio State in the championship game. But, in that 2014 college year for Jameis, I saw glimpses of what he ultimately became in the NFL, and that was a turnover machine. He threw 18 touchdowns, and every time, I paid close attention to Florida State that year. Every time they played, it's like, not every time, but in terms of the success, the team did go undefeated in the regular season. They did go 13-0, but they did lose a lot of games in which they could have lost very much as well. And they were escaping a lot of games. And you just saw it. You just saw that this team is different from the 2013. The difference is the 2014 Florida State team is beatable. And it showed in the playoffs when they went up against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And Jameis carried that same careless play to his professional career. So the Bucs drafted him with the first overall pick in 2015. He has about 70-some turnovers combined. No, he's thrown like 71 interceptions, fumbled the ball, I believe, 23 times, 100 plus turnovers combined. This last year, what turned out to be his last year in Tampa, turned the ball over 35 times, 30 interceptions, 5 lost fumbles. He threw 33 touchdowns. He rushed for 1, I believe. He threw for well over 5,000 yards, and he had 11 games in which he had 300 yards passing or more. The Bucs got off to a 2-6 start. Was similar to the Atlanta Falcons. They got off to a 2-6 start, and at one point of the season, they were 7-7. And we weren't looking at them like, oh, they could make the playoffs, because we knew they weren't going to make it because they were 7-7. And Minnesota actually, they were in contention, but I believe Minnesota went 10-6 and grabbed the 6th seed. But no one really took Tampa serious. We just looked at the potential because we know what Tampa have. Just like the Falcons, we know what Tampa had this past season. They finished 7-9, third in the NFC South. And to me, the record just showed the potential of the team. But the team ultimately fell short of making the playoffs. They had new head coach who came out of retirement, Bruce Arians. And his coaching guru just showed so much with Jameis, because Jameis looked good, but he also looked bad. And it just showed, man, if this team had somebody who didn't turn the ball over as much, somebody with, experience, he could take this team a long way. And Tampa did just that. It was the team's end of season press conference. Bruce Arians said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, if we can win with this quarterback, we can win with another one. And I was just like, wow. He just said that about a guy who is currently still on the roster. And it was just signs of the times for Jameis. It was just a matter of time. Tampa ended up releasing Jameis Winston. And who did they sign? No one saw it coming. So Tampa ended up releasing Jameis Winston. And I didn't mention it when I was covering the Saints earlier, but Jameis ended up signing with New Orleans, I believe last week. He ended up signing with the Saints. And he's going to be backing up Drew Brees. And this is a good situation for Jameis because, like I said, we've always seen the flashes. He just needs to take care of the football and not be so careless with it. But he's going into a situation in which Sean Payton is his coach. I'm not sure what the Saints' long-term plans are with Jameis, but Sean Payton is a quarterback coach. I mean, he's the head coach, but he's coached quarterback. He's an offensive-minded coach. And he could help Jameis out tremendously. Bruce Arians showed that Jameis had potential, but Sean Payton may be the guy who could take Jameis to the next level. So this is a very interesting signing right here for the Saints. I like it. I don't want to see Jameis fail, but so far he has failed because he spent 5 years in Tampa and they had one winning season. It was a pedestrian one at that, 9-7, not knocking anyone's socks off, but they didn't make the playoffs. 5 years, no playoff appearances, a lot of turnovers, and that was the story of his Tampa Bay career. The team went out and made an unexpected signing. No one saw it coming. It was kind of like, I don't know if you can really compare it to this situation, but it was kind of like Kawhi Leonard signing with the Clippers. We all knew it was a possibility, but he had everyone fooled like it was going to be the Lakers. Tom Brady wasn't really trying to fool anyone, but Kawhi had everyone fooled like it was going to be the Lakers, and he ended up signing with the Clippers. In terms of what Brady was going to sign, it was pure speculation on everyone's part. And we thought Chargers, we thought Raiders, even for some strange reason, the Niners were in the conversation. But Brady ended up signing with the Buccaneers on a 2-year deal. But Tampa came out of nowhere because I thought for sure it was going to be the Chargers. I thought it would be a great fit. The Chargers going into a new stadium this season. And what better way to sell tickets at a new stadium where you haven't really done anything since you've been back in LA. I mean, they had that one good season last year, but it ended in disappointment when they got beat down by New England, when a lot of people thought that they were going to be in the Super Bowl. I'm thinking this is a great way for the Chargers to open the new stadium by bringing in Tom Brady. Tom is up there in age, but Tom Brady is still box office, and it's showing. He's hot right now. He's a hot commodity. They love him in Tampa already. Season tickets sold out. This is the most excited about football they've been in Tampa in years. You know it. Like I said, the team hasn't been to the playoffs since 2007. They haven't won a playoff game since 2002. And now they have Tom Brady, a guy that 6 championships. That's considered the greatest of all time by a lot of people, including myself. It's as if the team wasn't loaded already, then something else happened. Rob Gronkowski came out of retirement. The Patriots agreed to trade Gronkowski to the Buccaneers along with a 7th-round pick, and New England got a 4th-round pick in return. This was crazy news. First, Brady, we didn't see it coming, and we're looking at what Tampa already have in terms of receivers. They have Chris Godwin, and they have Mike Evans. And then Gronk, I never thought that he was completely done with the game. I think he is doing, and I'm gonna get into this a little bit later, I believe Gronk just wanted to take a year off to heal and come back. He probably had some sort of friction in New England as well. That's why they didn't care about letting him, go to Tampa. They didn't care about keeping him or holding him hostage or anything. It was like, fine, you can go. Brady's your guy. We know Gronk and Brady get along very well. He went to Tampa, and I think he took that year off just to recover. If Brady was still in New England, I still think Gronk would have came out of retirement and been a Patriot. Just like, like I said, we're going to get into this later, but Luke Kuechly, I think Kuechly's retired, but I think Kuechly's just healing. I think the guy loved football way too much to stay gone. And I'm not saying, hey, we'll get into that later. I'm not going to talk about that right now. We'll get into it later. But yeah, Tampa Bay, heavy favorites now. Heavy favorites in a loaded NFC conference. Not just the NFC South. Like I said, I don't think the Falcons will do much, but who knows? Like I said, they're still a talented team. So not just the NFC South that the Bucs are favored to win, but I think they are huge favorites to win the NFC in general. And it won't be, they won't have this window forever. It'll probably be 1 or 2 years, but hey, that's all the fans need sometime. I mean, I still sit back and wish Carolina had won the Super Bowl 50, because, at this point I'll probably be like, okay, can we win another one? But, I just wish we'd have gotten that one. And that's what fans just want. They just want that championship, because that 2002 championship that the Bucs won, the fans are way over that. They're ready for another one. And this is the most hope they've had since then. Ain't won a playoff game since 07. Only been to the playoffs twice since the Super Bowl win in 02. This is long overdue for the Bucs. Heavy favorites. I can't say I'm going to pick them yet. I still want to see, we still don't even know if we're going to have a season, to be honest. We don't know what things are going to be like, but just assuming, Tampa Bay will be heavy favorites. When it comes to the Carolina Panthers, for me, there's a lot to unpack here because, like I said, this is my team. And I'm probably going to spend more time on this one than I did the previous 3 teams in the NFC South. So the big headlines for the Panthers, they released Cam Newton. Ron Rivera was fired during the season, hired new head coach Matt Rule. I want to recap the draft that they had a little bit. And Luke Kuechly retired. But I have thoughts on that. I have thoughts on Luke Kuechly retiring because I don't think that he's going to stay retired. I think for sure he's going to miss the entire 2020 season. He needs time to recover. But for now, let's start with, where do we want to start? Let's start with Ron Rivera. So yeah, the offseason started early for the Carolina Panthers in terms of, changes they were looking to make. Ron Rivera was released during the season, a Week 13 home loss to the Washington Redskins. After that loss, he was fired the next day, and he was hired by, ironically, the team that cost him his job, the Washington Redskins. He spent 9 years in Carolina, where he had a 76-63-1 record. One tie was in 2014 to the Cincinnati Bengals. 3-4 in the postseason, took the Panthers to the 2nd Super Bowl in team history. Not by much, but most successful coach in Carolina history. John Fox was 73-71, and he took the Panthers to the Super Bowl back in 2003. But Rivera also won Coach of the Year twice, 2013 and 2015. Started 1-3 in 2013, finished 12-4, and finished 15-1, and made it to the Super Bowl in 2015. My thoughts on this firing, if he was brought back, I wouldn't have minded that, but it's new ownership, which meaning change. It was time for it. Rivera was a great coach for the Panthers. Can't complain. The guy was always, came and always did his job to make sure that the team was ready to play. Great coach. I know he was well respected, but it was time for a change because this team was too inconsistent on offense. And I think what the new head coach, Matt Rule, has done, he's shown through the draft, Matt Rule has shown that the team is better on offense than what they have been displaying. And I think Ron Rivera, I think offensively, I don't want to say he didn't put enough emphasis on offense, but there was definitely something missing there coaching-wise, because otherwise he wouldn't have been fired. I respect and I thank Ron Rivera for everything he's done for the team that I root for, but it was time for a change there. It's going to be interesting to see what Matt Rule does. I know the NFL is just seems like they're drifting to this wave of young head coaches. Matt Rule got a really big money deal, $60 million deal. He signed with the Panthers the week after Rivera signed with the Redskins, coached at Baylor formerly. His only previous stint in the NFL, I believe, was he was an offensive line coach for the Giants in 2012. And then he went on to coach at Temple. He coached there for 4 years, took the team to 2 bowl games, and then he went to Baylor for 3 years before coming to Carolina. He took Baylor to 2 bowl games. He came to Baylor and turned that program around, in the midst of the scandal that they were going through. I guess that's what he's known for, turning around teams, bad teams. Baylor was going through that scandal, and Temple just wasn't a good team, and he helped turn them around. So it'll be interesting to see what Matt Rule can do here in Carolina. I'm happy for it. It's a change, new ownership, new coach, sadly, new quarterback, and that's the next thing we're going to get into. So Cam Newton has played his final game in Carolina. For me, this one is like I said, I didn't mind the Rivera firing. If he came back, I wouldn't have minded. Now that he's fired, I don't mind, but Cam Newton is different because, Cam is, I always felt like Cam has always gotten a bad rap in the NFL. A lot of people, a very unappreciated player, in my opinion, my view. I'm very sad to see him go. Like I said, no mixed emotions here. I'm very sad to see him go. I didn't like how he was let go, and the thing that bothered me the most is how he talked about how the team pretty much tried to make it look as if it was Cam's fault they let him go. They tried to manipulate the situation, and Cam went and called him out on it. And it just reminded me of how Steve Smith left back in 2013, when he said that Coach Rivera wouldn't even come out of his office to talk to him. And it was just like a bitter taste. It was bitter for me because Steve Smith is one of the greatest players in franchise history. And now we got Cam Newton, who was the greatest player in franchise history. And it feels like he's gone on a sour note as well. We'll see. I haven't heard him say anything since addressing that situation on social media. So I'm going to recap Cam Newton's career here, spend some time on this. I'm going to go through each season. But first, we have to start with the season that got us Cam Newton. How did we get Cam Newton? How did the Carolina Panthers get Cam Newton? 2010 was a blessing in disguise. The team was terrible. A season that I don't remember it happened because to me, it was just that bad. I've been a Panther fan since. I didn't watch football in 2001, but I remember playing a video game, NFL Blitz, and I was just looking for a team to pick. I never watched football, so I didn't know any teams, and the black and blue Panther logo just stood out, so I just picked them. I didn't get heavily into football until about 2007, so for me, 2010, and in 2001, they were 1-15. That's why I'm bringing this up. They were really terrible that year, so you can never accuse me of being a bandwagon fan. So in 2010, the team went 2-14, and this is the worst season that I've ever experienced as a fan. They scored only 16 touchdowns offensively, 9 passing, 7 rushing. The most points they scored in a win that year was 23. The most points they scored in a loss was 23. So as you can tell, this was a very, very terrible team who was in need of a quarterback, in need of change. They had just won a division in 2008. They had a mediocre 8-8 season in 2009. In 2010, I honestly thought that they were going to be a good team because Matt Moore came alive in those last few games in 2009, and Carolina, ended up finished with a mediocre 8-8 record, and Matt Moore looked really good. Team played Matt Moore that year. I believe he got injured. Either he got injured, like I said, I don't care to remember the season. Either he got injured or benched, but I know Jimmy Clausen, how many of you remember that name? Jimmy Clausen came in and quarterback for the team, and they were no better. The team was just terrible, and this led us to the 2011 NFL draft. Cam Newton had just won the national championship with Auburn, just like Jameis did. Well, no, Jameis played against Auburn, I'm out of it, guys. So Cam had led Auburn to the national championship, and when I wasn't I was watching college football, but I wasn't too heavily into college football just yet. But when I heard about this Cam Newton guy, I started following Auburn because I'm like, oh, this is the guy that the Panthers are going to draft. So I'm following this team to see how this dude is. And Cam was just electric. He was just tearing it up at Auburn, ended up winning a national championship, and he ended up being the first overall pick in 2011 by the Carolina Panthers. And the funniest thing that I look back and laugh on now about that is, you know, I think I heard whispers that, oh, this guy's going to be the next Jamarcus Russell, just a bust. And for everyone who said that, I'm looking at them like, okay, how did that work out for you? Because Cam Newton was no bust. And his career is not over. I'm talking as if his career is over. Cam Newton still have a lot left in the tank. I'm going to be rooting for Cam no matter where he go, because personally, you know, as a quarterback, I like Cam Newton. I thought he was going to be the guy to take the Panthers there and win it. He took us there, but he didn't win it for us. We can get into that later too. But he took us to the Super Bowl. So in 2011, the Panthers take Cam Newton, and he started right away. There was no debate about this. They had Derek Anderson. You know, that could have been because they had Derek Anderson on the roster, and Anderson is a former Pro Bowler with the Cleveland Browns. Actually, in 2007, Cleveland went 10-6, and Anderson was the quarterback of that team. They didn't make the playoffs, but Anderson was really good for Cleveland that year. So there could have been a situation in which Cam didn't start right away, and I'm just honestly, I don't know how much that would have affected him negatively had he not started right away. So I'm glad Cam started right away. And right out of the gates, the Panthers weren't winning, but Cam was really good, and he showed what he was going to end up turning into. Team went 6-10. Like I said early in 2010, 16 offensive touchdowns, 1 on defense. So they scored 17 total touchdowns in 2010. You want to guess how many Cam Newton scored by himself in 2011, his rookie year? 35. 21 passing, 14 rushing. He did turn the ball over quite a bit, 17 interceptions. Interesting stat, Carolina was 0-10 in games in which Cam turned the ball over, and 6-0 when he didn't turn the ball over. And they finished 6-10. So just imagine if Cam didn't turn the ball over in some of those close losses. Carolina could have been a playoff team his rookie year, but that was then, this is now. So he threw for 400 plus yards in his first 2 games. He was the first rookie to throw for 400 yards in a debut game. He made the Pro Bowl that year. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he was NFL Rookie of the Year. At the time, he broke the rookie passing record for quarterback. That record has since been broken. I believe Andrew Luck broke it the following year. And I don't know for sure, but I think it's been broken since then, but don't quote me on that. So he threw for 4,551 yards his rookie year. Believe it or not, he never threw for 4,000 yards again. Like I said, his career isn't over. So since then, he's yet to throw for over 4,000 yards in a season. And to me, that's all because Cam stopped trying to make a big play on every down. He stopped trying to be Superman on every down and just let the game come to him eventually after his rookie year. You know, he had his numbers, but he still had some learning to do because, like I said, with the Saints, Michael Thomas, he get those numbers, but that doesn't always translate into championships. Cam getting his numbers, but team success, they weren't getting it done. A game that stood out, you know, the Cardinals was his first game. He lost that game. He threw for over 400 yards. And then week 2, they played the defending champion Green Bay Packers. They lost that game 30-23. But the thing that stood out in that game for me, I don't know how many of you remember, but Aaron Rodgers said that he overheard one of his teammates in the locker room after they beat the Panthers say, "I'm glad we played them now because when he figures it out," and I'm paraphrasing, he said, "I'm glad we played them now because he's going to be trouble once he figure it out." So they were glad to have played the Panthers and gotten it out of the way because they saw the talent, they saw what Cam Newton was going to be capable of. First win in that season came against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 3. So yeah, that was the 2011 season for Cam. And then 2012, the team had one win more than the previous year. They finished 7-9. The most frustrating part about this season was that they lost 6 one-possession games. The only 2 games in which the Panthers lost in which they had no chance was against the Manning brothers. They got blew out by the Giants, Eli Manning, and they got blew out by Denver, Peyton Manning. And then they had 6 one-possession losses. And that was just, for me as a fan, that was just frustrating to watch. In that season, Cam played his first national televised game on ESPN. He played the Eagles. Panthers won that game 30-22. Cam threw for 306 yards, and he had 4 total touchdowns in that game. His season stats, 3,800 yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You look at those stats, yeah, it's less yards than he had the previous year, also less touchdowns, but you can see the progression of Cam Newton. 2013, team went 12-4, made it to the playoffs for the first time since 2008. Like I said, when we were talking about Ron Rivera, they started that season 1-3, and I remember just being frustrated because I knew that they were better than what they were showing on the field. And funny story, I had a Panthers keychain I was rocking to school, and I remember after they lost, it was Arizona. They played the Giants the week before, and they won 35-0. And then the very next week, they lose to the Cardinals. Started the season with 2 losses to the Bills and Seahawks, and then they lose to the Cardinals after a dominating win against the Giants. And I got so mad, I just hung up my Panther keychain, and the Lakers weren't really good that year, and I just put on my Laker keychain because I was just like, all right, I'm frustrated with this team. So I protested and hanging up my keychain. That's just me though. So Ron Rivera at this point was on a hot seat, but the team, like I said, eventually turned it around. Key wins that year, Cam beat Brady for the first time, and that game was on ESPN, 24-20, and we all remember the controversy on the last play of the game when Kuechly held Gronkowski. Refs threw a flag, but they picked it back up because they said that Gronk wasn't in position to catch the ball. It was an uncatchable pass. So Panthers hung on to win that game, and they were all season long they were in a race with the Saints for the division title. Late in the season, they played the Saints twice in 2 weeks. Saints blew the Panthers out 31-13 in a Sunday night football game. That was Cam's first Sunday night game, and he got blown out. But during that time, everyone who played the Saints in the Dome got blown out. So nothing there. And the Panthers got their revenge 2 weeks later in Carolina. They won a close game, ended up winning the division by beating the Falcons in Cam's hometown of Atlanta, 21-20. This was the Panthers' first division title since 2008. When they played the Niners in the regular season, they won a close 10-9 game, and that was the final time they had ever played in Candlestick, and they beat San Francisco. So when they were getting ready to play the Niners again in the playoffs, I thought, hey, we don't have to blow these guys out. We don't have to be flashy. We just have to score more points. But the Niners showed that the Panthers were just a young team on the rising, and the Niners were just the most experienced team. They dominated that game from start to finish, won 23-10. Not a flashy looking, dominating score, but when you look at the game, Carolina never stood a chance against San Francisco. So that was 2013. The team showing progression, made the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. 2014 was interesting. The team finished 7-8-1 and became the second team in NFL history to win a division championship and make the playoffs with a losing record. They won back-to-back division titles. That was the first time in franchise history they'd done that. Cam missed 2 games that year. Both were against the Buccaneers. He was dealing with an injury during the opener, and after a 41-10 win over the Saints late in the season, Cam got into a car accident a couple days later. He suffered 2 fractures in his lower back, but he was still able to play. He missed 1 game, like I said, he missed the following game against the Bucs to recover, but he was still able to play the last 2 games to win the division. And he once again beat the Falcons the last game of the season to win the division for the Panthers. They made it to the playoffs, and they won the playoff game against the Cardinals, and that was their first home playoff win since 2003 when they beat the Dallas Cowboys. So they ended up losing in the divisional playoff round to the Seattle Seahawks. I was at that game. A buddy of mine from high school, we actually drove to Seattle to see that game. And in that game, Seattle won 31-17, and if you were a Seahawk fan, when you look at the final score, and everything about the game, you're like, yeah, it was never really, you can probably say it was never really any doubt that the Seahawks were going to win, but they let the Panthers hang around for quite a bit. And had it not, Cam threw an interception to Richard Sherman. I believe he threw 2 that game. But I just remembered at halftime when it was close, the Seahawks fans, about the ones that we were sitting by, they weren't as cocky because they were looking like, we always play these Panthers tough. At that point, Seattle has, when it's all said and done, Seattle is the biggest rivalry for Cam. He didn't win a lot, but they always played tough games. In 2012, it was a close game. 2013, they played them tough. And in the regular season of 2014, it was a really close game. And then in the playoffs, that was the Seahawks' largest margin of victory since Cam and Russell played each other. But they eventually pulled away. They got a little touchdown at the end to bump up the score 31-17. But the fans weren't really, they were really nervous because Carolina had a chance to win that game. And I'm just looking like, if the Panthers win this game and go to the NFC Championship with a losing record, you just knew for a fact they were going to change the rules that year. I mean, the following year when it came to records in the conference championship. They weren't going to let that slide like that. But Carolina ultimately lost the game, eliminated from the playoffs, and then came 2015, and this season, nobody saw it coming. And I'll tell anybody, not even me, I'm not going to sit here like, oh, I thought the Panthers were going to just be this powerhouse. I thought they could make the playoffs because judging by 2014, the Saints, Falcons, Bucks, especially the Bucks, they weren't looking any better. Had I came to anyone and said, hey, let's make a bet. In 2015, this upcoming season, the Panthers are going to start 14-0. We're going to finish 15-1. Cam is going to beat out Brady, Russell Wilson, and all these guys, Aaron Rodgers. He's going to win MVP, and the Panthers are going to make the Super Bowl. Anyone would have taken me on that bet because no one, including myself, saw this season coming in 2015. This was Cam's breakout year. He threw for 35 touchdowns, ran for 10, and he won the MVP. Every time they scored, home or away, they gave the ball to a young fan. And I remember, it's interesting, I remember in 2015, this is the first time I followed the Panthers on Twitter. And I was looking at their Twitter account, and don't ask me how I remember this, but I remember they had about like 300-some thousand followers. It was either like 500, it was like 300 or 500-some thousand followers during the beginning of this season. And I remember I went back later on in the season when they started to catch fire, when people started to notice them, and they had like 1 million followers. And it was just unbelievable to see how in the matter of weeks or a couple months, how they were able to catch on with everyone. And everyone just like took to the Panthers, a franchise that is not very popular. If you ask non-football fans who are the Carolina Panthers, they probably couldn't tell you. You ask them who the Dallas Cowboys are, everyone knows who the Cowboys are. So I just thought that was like very interesting, and I like to see my team catching on like that. After week 7, the Panthers were one of 5 undefeated teams in the league. Signature wins that year, they beat the Seahawks. They started the season with 4 wins over teams that weren't really that good. Houston made the playoffs that year, but Andrew Luck got hurt that year, and let's be honest, that's the only reason Houston made it. They beat the Jags, they beat the Texans, they beat the Saints without Drew Brees, and they beat the Bucks. Went on a bye week, came back, and they had an impressive fourth quarter comeback win over Seattle. They were down 9 points, and you just knew all hope was lost because Seattle always wins these games against the Panthers. But Cam was able to come back and throw the game-winning touchdown to Greg Olsen. Still, I don't think people are really taking the Panthers that serious. I still think they were looking like, they got lucky. Yeah, they came back in the fourth quarter in Seattle, but whatever, anybody can get lucky. And then they won the following week against the Eagles, but the Eagles weren't really that good. They weren't really good that year, I don't think. I believe, Washington won the division that year. Eagles didn't make the playoffs. Then they went on to win a Monday night game against the Colts. Got his first win against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. And then they had this win against the Saints where Cam just pretty much solidified his MVP. The only loss was to the Falcons, and after beating the Falcons 38-0, 2 weeks later, the Falcons came back, beat the Panthers 20-14 or 20-13, and they handed the Panthers their only loss of the regular season that year in Carolina. And this was the week before the last game of the season. The Panthers were 14-1 at that point. So they had a legit chance to go 16-0. And after they beat the Giants in that close game the week before, I thought, hey, maybe my brother won't have the only team that went 16-0. Maybe my team can do it also. But they went 15-1, went to the playoffs. And before I get to that, a lot of controversy surrounded Cam this year in this 2015 season, with the dancing and the dabbing and just doing all that. And it just bothered me how no one cared when they were losing. No one cared about who Josh Norman was, just like no one cared about who Richard Sherman was until he started coming out talking about Brady and talking about how Crabtree can't mess with him and all that. But all of a sudden the Panthers catch fire. Josh Norman is this outspoken guy and everyone wants to judge him now. Everyone wants to judge Cam now as well because he's having fun. He's doing it his way. He's not hurting anyone. After he beat the Titans, you had a Titans fan writing, I believe she wrote the league or someone talking about how this is a bad representation of the league because Cam is having fun out there. But yeah, you had all that controversy surrounding Cam because you didn't care when he was losing and soaking in the towel, but all of a sudden he's winning. So they go to the playoffs and they play the Seahawks, a team that they had just beaten in the regular season, early in the regular season. They go up 31-0 in the first half, and they are just dominating. And soon as I saw that, because I just know how sports work, not just my teams, but just sports in general. And I know what type of team the Seahawks are. I'm just looking like it's too much time left. I know it's 31. I know it's 31-0. But that's a lot of time left. And Russell Wilson came out, the Seahawks came out in the second half offensively, defensively, and they just shut the Panthers out. They outscored Carolina 24-0 in the second half. Carolina hung on to win that game, but boy, was I wiping sweat off my forehead after that, because Seattle just ran out of time. If they had more time, they would have probably won that game. And that's the thing that just, I wasn't really nervous going into the game right after that, because this is one to talk about right here. So they beat Seattle 31-24, and that right there was essentially the NFC Championship game, because the following week in the actual NFC Championship game, they destroyed Arizona 49-15. And this season, this is when everyone was saying, oh, yeah, Carolina's good, but they haven't played the Cardinals yet. They didn't play Arizona in the regular season. Arizona was the team who went 13-3 in the regular season. They were the 2 seed behind the Panthers. And a lot of people saying, yeah, the Panthers are good, they're doing their thing, but wait until they play the Cardinals. That's the team that's going to shut them up. Carson Palmer is going to win MVP over Cam. After the 49-15 thumping of the Arizona Cardinals, Cam threw for 335 yards in that game, 4 total touchdowns. They lost the Super Bowl to the Denver Broncos. And I was officially, I wouldn't say humbled, but I was officially quiet. I had a bad feeling going into the game, because I knew, football is so different. In basketball, usually in basketball, the best team wins. Football is so different. All you need to do is win one game in football. No, Denver did not have a better quarterback. They had a better all-time quarterback, of course. But in terms of the play that season, Cam was better than Manning. Manning was benched for about 8 games or so for Brock Osweiler. But Manning came back and played in the Super Bowl. We played in the entire playoffs for the Broncos, but Denver had a defense that I had never seen before from week 1 to week 17. I know about the 85 Bears, I know about the 2000 Ravens, but I had never seen a defense this dominant before. And they just, honestly, they took it to the Panthers. They took it to Cam Newton. Cam didn't play a great game at all. Wade Phillips was all over him. Wade Phillips had his guys ready, and they were all over the Panthers. Jonathan Stewart, I believe, scored the only touchdown for Carolina. It was defense. It was clearly defense. And in this game for because Von Miller, if you guys remember, he was drafted second after Cam in 2011. Von Miller didn't play in the Super Bowl 2 years prior against the Seahawks because he was injured, and he was drafted after Cam, so he came in there with a pretty big chip on his shoulder, I'm assuming. And Von Miller just took it to Cam Newton, and it's been a running joke since then. Cam Newton mostly criticized, he didn't talk to the media after the game, but a lot of people mostly remember him not diving on the football when he fumbled it, when Von Miller forced a fumble. I always defend Cam on this, because when I look at that play, and I don't know for sure if this was going through his head, but for me, I just look at it like there were a pile of Bronco players, and they were just destroying the Panthers' offensive line, and they were destroying Cam Newton. I think Cam's thought was, if he jumped on that ball, there's a chance that his leg could get seriously hurt. I mean, we saw what happened to Alex Smith. We saw, a lot of you guys remember what happened to Joe Theismann. We saw a lot of quarterbacks just get their leg seriously hurt in pile-ups. And I think that's what was running through Cam's mind at the time. He was gonna jump on the ball, but he saw that. But in the moment, he's thinking like, nah, I'm not gonna do this because, and I know a lot of you probably say, oh, you're just making excuses for him because that's your guy. You can say that, but I honestly think he was thinking about the future at that moment. He could have gotten seriously hurt had he jumped on that ball, because people did not like Cam Newton because of the things he was doing, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, but because of the things he was doing in 2015, the dancing and the way he celebrated winning, people did not like him. So I always defend Cam on not diving on that ball. I don't blame him for it. If I was in a situation, I probably wouldn't have dived on it either. I can't say for sure, but I just think that what was running through his mind. So that was peak Cam Newton's year. He had a great year that year. Unfortunately, they didn't win the Super Bowl, and we had to wait another year. And the following year, Jeez, talk about regressing. It was like his rookie year all over again in terms of the record. 6-10. Cam declined big time. Team started season the exact same way the postseason ended, a loss to the Broncos. And Cam took a lot of unnecessary shots, and he was so unfairly officiated, not only in this game, but a lot of that season. I mean, there was a game against the Falcons where the guy blatantly just cracked him in the head with his helmet. Not with his helmet off, but just head first. as Cam was going in the end zone. He still scored on that play, but the dude just like laid him out. Football give you the license to assault, but people were getting away with just unnecessarily hitting this guy in the head. And I'm thinking like, are the officials, is this like the Shaq rule of the NFL? Is Cam big, so you don't know how to officiate him? Because if so, that's, you know what a penalty is in NFL. So yeah, I think he was just really unfairly officiated that year. And I'm not making excuses for him. Cam had a terrible year that year. It wasn't just, the unnecessary hits, but Cam just regressed. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just defending what I thought was unfair. The highlights of the year for him in 2016, the team was terrible, but he did break Steve Young's rushing record week 1 against the Broncos when he rushed for his 44th touchdown. That became the most all-time for quarterback. So yeah, he also broke another one of Steve Young's record for most touchdowns passing and rushing in a game. He had 32 games in which he passed for a touchdown and rushed for a touchdown. And that was also another record he broke. So 2016, like I said, was a terrible year for Cam. He declined big time, and he was never really the same after that season. 2017, the team bounced back and they finished 11-5. Cam, he didn't have the flashy numbers after 2015, but they did win 11 games and made it to the playoffs. When he beat Brady again in the regular season. So all-time Cam Newton is 2-0 against Brady. They beat the Minnesota Vikings, who became the 2 seed. Could have had a first-round bye had they not lost to Atlanta in Week 17, because they could have won the division and got a bye. Instead, the team had to play the Saints for the 3rd time that year. They had lost the 2 regular season games to the Saints, and they had to go back to New Orleans for a 2nd time, and overall they had to play the Saints for the 3rd time that year. Cam really disappointed me on this one because he took a sack on the final play of the game. I'm not saying, had he thrown the ball, the receiver would have caught it in the end zone there to score, but you can't take a sack on the final play of not only a regular season game, but a playoff game. You get the ball, last play, and he takes a sack. I believe it was Cam Jordan of the New Orleans Saints, and the game was over, and I was just livid because I'm like, how do you take a sack? It's like, how do you take a sack on the final play of a playoff game? And they had a chance to win. They had a chance to score before that, and I'm not bailing Cam out, but Devin Funchess, instead of catching the ball, trying to catch the ball in the end zone, he tried to draw a flag, and the refs didn't call it. He was more focused on trying to draw the flag when he could have been more focused on catching the pass that was thrown to him. But the Panthers, 3 losses in the season to the Saints that year, and that would be the last time Cam Newton played in the playoffs for the Panthers. That would be the last time that Carolina made it to the playoffs, and that was the last Cam Newton playoff game. In 2018, the team went in a different direction on offense. They hired Norv Turner as the offensive coordinator. Cam had only had a 60% completion percentage twice in his career before 2018, where he completed 68% of his passes in the 14 games he played. That was the highest of his career, nearly 70% of his passes. He was always criticized for not having more 60% completion percentages, a 60% completion percentage. Team started 6-2, and they were clearly the dark horses behind the Saints and the Rams. Everyone was talking about the Saints and the Rams. They were just, counting out the Panthers and the other teams. And I thought, talent-wise, Saints and Rams are better teams, but the Panthers have a chance. But everything changed on a Thursday night game that I like to just forget. And that's when Cam took a big hit from TJ Watt, brother of Houston Texans, JJ Watt, in the shoulder, and Cam was never the same again, especially for the rest of that season. He was never the same again. As the season went on, the team lost 7 straight games after a 6-2 start, and we just started to slowly notice that Cam wasn't throwing the ball down the field. They lost close games, but Cam could not throw the ball down the field at all. It showed that he was clearly banged up. He was clearly injured. Took a big hit from TJ Watt, and he was never the same after that. And who knows what the team could have done had he not gotten injured. They were 6-2, and they were well on their way from being a playoff team. In 2019, when Cam played against the Bucks in Week 2 on Thursday night, I turned the TV off because his play was frustrating me so much, and the team play overall. I was just like, you know what? They're not going to win this game. I turned it off when they got the ball back and a chance to win. So I was like, okay, I'm turning the game off and I'm going to sleep. I got to get up at 3 o'clock. They ended up losing the game. McCaffrey was stuffed at the goal line. I had no idea at the time that I was turning off Cam Newton's final game for the Carolina Panthers. They lost the opening week to the Rams. Cam didn't score a touchdown in that game. Week 2 against Tampa, a few days later, Thursday night, he didn't score a touchdown. I had no idea that I was watching and turning off Cam's last game for the Panthers. He didn't play for the rest of the season after hurting his ankle and was shut down. Team went on to win 4 straight games, and everybody was falling in love with Kyle Allen. But, even though at the time Allen wasn't throwing interceptions like he would eventually go on to do when the team started losing, he was still fumbling the football. The game against the Houston Texans, in which they won, he fumbled the ball and lost 3 fumbles. But people were just focusing on the fact that he wasn't throwing interceptions, and they were falling in love with it. And then came the interceptions, and the team just started losing and losing and losing and losing and losing and losing. Finished 5-11 that year. On March 17th, the Panthers said they gave Cam Newton permission to seek a trade after not finding a trade partner for him. They released him after not finding a trade partner for him. And this tells me that, with them not finding a trade partner, this just tells me that people sold on him as a starter. They're really hesitant, Cam as a starter. That's what I see with this. I hope Andy Dalton did just sign with the Cowboys, so maybe now New England is a real possibility. At this point, I doubt it because, I'm wondering what's taking so long. Like I said, we still don't know if football is going to be played because of the virus and everything that's going on. But what are you waiting for if you're thinking of signing Cam Newton? Because you got to start OTAs in a bit. There's a lot of stuff that he has to get familiar with his new team. I don't think Cam wants to take a backup position. I think that's what he's being offered. I don't think he wants to do that. I'm not sure what Bill Belichick is going to do in terms of the quarterback position, but if they are interested, why are they taking so long? Not just the Patriots, but any team. So that tells me that teams are hesitant on him being a starter. But that was Cam Newton's Panther career. Like I said, I'm going to miss him as the Panthers quarterback. I really like Cam. I really thought he was going to be the one to put us over and take us to the Super Bowl. Well, he took us to the Super Bowl, but lead us to a Super Bowl win. Sad to see him go, but I am happy about the future of the Panthers. So the team went out and signed Teddy Bridgewater, who spent 2 years, I believe, backing up Drew Brees in New Orleans. Teddy went 5-0 last year when Brees got injured. Really looked good in those games. It was one game against Dallas where, offensively they just weren't there, but after that Teddy really looked good, so I'm happy about this signing. I don't want to be the prisoner of the moment, but I honestly think that Teddy is going to be a really good quarterback for us. I think he's going to fit Matt Rule's system very well for what I think he's trying to do with this offense. Teddy signed a $63 million contract, and we remember back in 2016 when Teddy had went down with that nasty injury he suffered in a non-contact drill in practice when he was with the Minnesota Vikings. So he missed 16 months of his career, and now he's bounced back in a big way. Now he's with the Panthers. I expect Teddy to be really good for Carolina. I expect the Panthers offense to be much better with Christian McCaffrey, Teddy Bridgewater, and the receivers they have out there. Big hit that Carolina took. Another big hit was Luke Kuechly, the guy who was drafted with the Panthers' first pick the year after Cam was drafted. He retired after 8 seasons with the Panthers. He decided to call it quits. But my quick thoughts on this, just like Gronk, I think Kuechly will be back. And I'm not saying, man, I really wish he'd come back, because the dude he's had a lot of concussions. He's been injured a lot. And I would never in my life put, football over someone's personal health. So I do think he's going to come back, but I'm not saying, man, I really hope he comes back, because, football is a really dangerous sport. So it's him stepping away, I think, was the best move for him, even though, as a player, I'm going to miss him because Kuechly's a great player. He made lots of noise with the Panthers when he was there. So he's going to be a big, gap that the team is hoping to fill at the linebacker position. The team went out this draft and they had 7 draft picks, and all 7 of those picks were defensive players. They selected Derrick Brown with their first overall pick, and he's a defensive tackle. They took 2 D tackles in that draft, so excited to see what they do on the defensive side of the ball. They also took a defensive end. They took 2 safeties and 2 cornerbacks. Defense was terrible last year. The secondary really struggled. The Panthers gave up a lot of big plays. The line was terrible. They gave up a lot of running. Like, you've never seen the Panthers give up so many rushing yards in a season. So they needed to do this. And what this tells me is that Matt Rule is confident in what the Panthers have on offense. A lot of people, I've heard people say it, and I agree with it. The Panthers' offense is fine. They have the talent there to get it done. And I think Matt Rule believes that he, as a coach, he has what it takes to take this team over with the offense they already have, with the weapons they already have. it's defense that he wanted to focus on, and it really showed in his draft by taking all defensive players because the team really needed defense. I thought they would take a secondary player with the first pick, but I'm fine with a D tackle after I looked and reevaluated it because the team struggled in the run defense, and that's not Carolina football. They've always been a good run stop defense, and they've always prided themselves on defense. But it shows that Matt Rule is confident in offense. He believes that what they have on offense is enough. I think the Panthers, they're going to shock a lot of teams this year. I think the Panthers are going to shock a lot of teams this year. It's going to be tough. Like I said, not only is it a tough division, but it's a tough conference in general. You know, with the teams that I'm about to name, I'm not saying that all of them will be, great teams, but you look at Arizona, they improve. San Francisco is still there. The Rams are still there. Seattle will never leave for some reason. You got the Bucks, Falcons, the Saints, Green Bay. Things are going on there, but, just judging it off last year, Green Bay is still there. Chicago still have a great defense. Minnesota, you got Dallas, you got Philadelphia. There's a lot of teams that can potentially do it. All of them won't make it, of course, only 6 will, but there's a lot of teams in contention for playoff positions. And it's going to be tough, but I honestly like what the Panthers are doing. I hate the fact that they got rid of Cam, but I think at the end it'll all pay off. I do hope Cam succeeds wherever he goes. I'll be rooting for him, but I'm really excited about this Panthers season, and let's see, hopefully we have a season. Let's see where it takes us. Let's see where this 2020 season can take the Carolina Panthers. Hopefully we can strike gold the way we did in 2015, minus the Super Bowl loss. Hopefully we can win it this time if we make it. I honestly believe the Panthers will be a good team. I'm not one of those fans who just say it just because I root for them. But I think the Panthers will be a good team, and I'm excited to see what happens in the 2020 season.